How's it being? It's okay. It's all good. Hey, everybody, welcome. It is the Randy Justice Show. And tonight we're going to be talking about ketamine, what it is, what it does. And you all might have seen a article that came out today where back in October, actor Matthew Perry, you might know him better as Chandler on Friends. Tonight we're going to be talking about ketamine, what it is, ended up passing away, and they found a massive amount of ketamine in his system, and we have determined how much he had in his system, or Dr. Major has. But I want to welcome Dr. Michael Major to the show. My wife Deb, who you all know, is here. And we have joining us by phone nurse practitioner Melissa Major. Hello, Melissa. And so, man, I'm just excited that everybody's here, and I hope that hope you all enjoy the show tonight. And Ski says have reverb. I hear you talking, then I hear you talking. Okay, I don't know why. All my settings are the same as they have been. Everybody's here, and I hope you all enjoy the show tonight. And Ski says have Melissa needs to turn off her feed. Are you watching us through? Melissa? Are you watching through YouTube? All my settings are the same as they have been. Oh, okay, yeah. If anybody in here, if you got YouTube on, you got your volume on, you need to turn that off. Are you watching this? Melissa, are you watching? I'm pretty trustworthy. I think I am. I mean, you know, I wouldn't do. It's the one off your website where you're sitting. It's that real nice one. You sitting in the chair. Yeah, it is. So I wouldn't do you wrong. But anyway, man, everybody, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have everybody here. And tonight, again, we're going to talk about ketamine. So, Mike, glad to have you here. For everybody that doesn't know, I talk about you guys every week. But Mike and Melissa are the practitioners and the owners of Embody Healthcare here in Knoxville. Embody Healthcare is a direct primary care office. And boy, I tell you, I'm not with it tonight. But basically, direct primary care, it's a membership service where you don't have to have insurance to see the doctors. And so it's really good for people who don't have any insurance, or people who don't like having to pay a copay every time that they come to the office. So, we were talking about ketamine. First of all, let's tell everybody what ketamine is. We've had so many people ask every week about ketamine, even when I've been doing other shows. So, Mike, why don't you tell everybody what ketamine is, where it came from, and what it's being used for now?
So ketamine was initially created, developed, found.
We were talking about ketamine. First of all, let's tell everybody what ketamine
kind of
is.
as a
We've had so many people
analog
ask
to
every week about
PCP. They were
ketamine,
trying to find something
even when I've been doing other shows. So,
PCP-like
Mike, why don't you tell everybody what ketamine is, where it came from, and what it's being used for now?
And they synthesized ketamine. What they found out that it kind of had, rather than an activating factor, it had more of a relaxing factor, and caused kind of putting people to sleep. And part of the benefit of it too was they would have dissociations with it, and so it became known as a dissociative anesthetic. And it's been around a long time. I mean, they use it in operating rooms thousands and thousands and times a day, in surgeries. And then probably about 20 years ago, there's some research that was done that showed people who had been receiving ketamine had a decrease in their depression symptoms. And so they started researching ketamine for use in depression, and had extremely phenomenal results from it.
So ketamine, from everything I've read and researched myself about ketamine in therapeutic doses is very safe.
Very.
Very safe medication. As a matter of fact, I know in anesthesia, it's even used in children and the elderly as well as adults because of how safe it is.
Very much so. I mean, you may receive ketamine in the emergency room if your child falls, breaks their arm, and maybe they need to reset the fracture. Rather than giving them loads of pain medication, which can have a respiratory effect, they will use ketamine. It causes enough sedation that the child isn't aware of what's going on. So given in emergency rooms, trauma situations, they carry it on ambulances rather than using morphine or Dilaudid in their drug kits for people with pain. Ketamine's given in the back of an ambulance.
It's interesting. The first time that I ever remember getting ketamine, and I may have had it several years ago when I broke my wrist. Now, to come to think about it, when you were talking about they give that a lot of times for that because it's a relatively quickly or a fast on and kind of a fast off. It doesn't stay in the system for hours.
Right, and if you give it IV through the cannula, onset's probably within 30 seconds. So most of the time, even before they're done pushing the medication, you're already feeling the effect. Once you've received your dose, it may last 10, 15 minutes, and then it wears off.
Right. The second time I remember getting ketamine was I had a motorcycle crash in 2013 and ended up fracturing a couple of teeth in my head, and had to have dental implants done. And I remember the doctor when he was giving me the medication, he was telling me that he does a cocktail, and I remember one of the things in the medication was ketamine. And that was my real first experience where I knew for sure I was getting ketamine, and it was it was different, that's for sure. It different than any other anesthesia, because I know some anesthesias out there, when people are coming out of them, they still feel drugged. They still feel it takes a while to wear off. But with ketamine, it was relatively quick that those effects wore off.
Yes. Yeah. So when they do give it, you can give it as a bolus push. So a certain dose, boom, they just push it in you, and then 10, 15 minutes they've got to work with that. Usually if they're going to run it in operating rooms, they'll actually have it as a drip. So they'll continuously infuse it because it's metabolized so quickly. They'll continuously run ketamine on you during your procedure. Close to the procedure time, they shut it off, and by the time the surgeon closes up, ketamine's wearing off and you're waking up.
So anybody that's watched any of our previous conversations we've had about it knows that you and Melissa at Embody, you guys do ketamine infusion therapy.
We do. We came to do it because we both received ketamine treatments a number of years ago, found it a phenomenal help for depression, and we were like, when we get our own practice, this is something that we want to do. We want to be able to offer it to others because it was just so phenomenal of the improvement.
Well, it's interesting. The way that I found you guys is, of course, for those that watch the show regularly, they know that I'm a former law enforcement officer and was having a lot of depression, anxiety, PTSD issues, anger outbursts that I couldn't really explain. And, statistics show that the average person in their life has 4 to 5 major traumatic events in their life. But first responders and military have well over 100 in their careers. And so it's no wonder that those of us that have ever done that job have those issues. And I can only imagine being a doctor, because I know you've worked in hospitals and ERs and stuff, I can only imagine how many you guys see. I mean, that's a daily basis in a hospital.
Yeah, we're the ones people come to with their traumas.
Yeah.
So they experience it, and we end up re-experiencing it.
Yeah, same thing we did as first responders, because it's already happened to them. Now we've got to be there, as first responders, to try to stabilize them, to get them to you guys at the hospital so you can take care of them.
Well, and us being the experts, we're kind of not allowed to have the moment.
Right.
It's their experience, but we're also sharing it, and we're on the job. We need to take care of these people right then and there, and so a lot of times we just learn to push it off, bury it deep. Oh, here's the next event we're getting involved in. Nope, can't handle that right now, can't deal with it, push it deep. and we just learn to push things further and further down into the psyche.
Yeah, boy, don't I know. And a lot of people, if you've never done that kind of job, you just don't understand that. My lovely wife sitting over there, you can attest to that's something I got very good at.
Yes, definitely.
It's one of those things, anytime that we've had a death or something in the family or a tragedy and everything, we unfortunately, I'm the go-to because I don't fall apart until after it's all taken care of. So it's still just built into me, muscle memory from where I did the first responder job. But ketamine, getting into it, so for depression, PTSD, anxiety, Alex, who I used to work with at the sheriff's office, he's the one that told me about you guys. And after my own research, finding out about ketamine, I sit down and talk to your lovely wife, Melissa, who couldn't be here tonight, but hopefully we've still got her joining us by phone. So that was Melissa. I've got her nice picture up there. So anyway, Melissa, the thing that really impressed me was the fact of that when me and Deb come in to talk to you, and that's the thing I like about you and Mike and Embody is it wasn't a little 15-minute visit or 10-minute visit like going to your normal doctor. You spent an hour, hour and a half with us answering every question we had and made us feel so comfortable.
Yeah, we do that. I mean, our appointment times are, our shortest one is 30 minutes, and our average is an hour. And we book that time in deliberately because we want to give you the time that you need. Whereas maybe a normal primary care appointment, they don't tell you how long the appointment is for, but on the books, it's typically 10 to 20 minutes is how your typical primary care appointment is booked. A complex appointment might get the benefit of being booked into a 30-minute appointment. But that 30-minute appointment is supposed to encompass everything. Your check-in, the pre-evaluation, the physician interview, the charting, the documentation, signing the note, sending in prescriptions, and moving you out the door.
Well, that's exactly right. I think the other thing that impressed me about you guys too is the fact of the appointments are always on time. Going to my regular, before I switched to you guys, because you're now my primary care physicians too, me and my whole family. But one of the things, when I would go to doctors in the past, I might have a 9:30 a.m. appointment. I'd be lucky to get back there by 10:30 a.m. Because there was always some kind of delay, always something happened. The one time that they had a woman give birth right there in the hospital, I understood that one. I get that. But normal circumstances, no. They book so many patients, like you said, and have 10, 15 minutes to see them. And if anything happens, it runs over, then, you're just left hanging out.
Right.
And
what also happens in those appointments is, the patients are charged a copay. So in addition to your time, you're having to pay the clinic $30 to $50 to be seen. So you want to make the most use of that money that you're paying.
Right.
And so in primary care, we always dread the, oh, by the way. So you spend the time with the appointment, they say they're coming in for a blood pressure follow-up. You've talked about their blood pressure, adjusted their medicines, done what you need to, send the prescription. And then we always typically ask, so is there anything else? Oh, by the way. And now is the multiple reasons that they came in for come out, and they can either say, well, we don't have time to address that. You need to make another appointment, which of course patients are resistant to because it's going to cost more money and more time. And so then they have to kind of deal with it, which pushes them behind schedule.
Well, that's exactly it. And that's a good plug for your practice. and I always like doing that. And we're going to talk a little bit later about an event you guys have coming up.
Yep.
For any business professionals out there. But right now, we're here to talk about ketamine and what it does. And the thing I'll say about ketamine is I came to you guys for ketamine. That's my original purpose before you even become my primary care physicians. And the one thing I can say after my very first ketamine infusion is that my depression was virtually gone. That was the most amazing thing to me. It was Now I think Deb and you were there. You were there for that first infusion.
I was.
And I think one of the things I said is I felt so much peace and so much. It was like the ketamine quietened down everything in my head because I had a lot rolling around up there, and it just quietened everything down. And it was the first time in a long time that I really felt that level of peace. And I hear a lot of people say the same thing when they go through that. Do you find that with your other patients?
I do. It's a very common story that we hear. Is it's either the first time they've been able to relax or been able to be quiet, or the voices in their head has gone to sleep, and they were able to be at peace. They were able to just be, rather than their brain turning over hundreds of times a minute, with rapid thoughts. They were silent, and there were no voices.
Yeah. And we don't mean they have DID either, dissociative identity disorder. It's just those normal voices that we all have. Those thoughts, those intrusive thoughts that come into us, and that happens to everybody at some point in their life, some people more than others. But again, you can't experience trauma and stuff in your life and that stuff just not roll around in your head. Again, we talked earlier about ketamine being very safe in therapeutic setting and therapeutic doses. So that gets us to Matthew Perry.
Oh, yes.
Had to bring it up since that came out today and we're talking about ketamine.
It is. Melissa sent me the news article around 4 o'clock and said, here, check this out. And then I turned the car on and heard on the radio, boom, that same news announcement. Because I wanted to see, I wondered when that news article she had sent me had come out, and it had just come out today. So it was kind of a great timing to have that now back in the news. And so I got curious. I'd always been curious. A lot of the ketamine providers, when the coroner report came out, or the autopsy report, and it listed ketamine as the cause of death, I'm like, I can't recall a single medical story where a patient has died from ketamine, and no one could. They can die from other complications with ketamine on board, but to actually have the cause of death as ketamine. So I was always curious as to, okay, how did they come up with that? And so I was able to get the autopsy report with the lab results. So when someone dies and it's under suspicious causes, they take blood samples from the body and send it off to the lab for toxicology. Now, those take a while to come back. But they did a ketamine level. I'm not going to go through specific units. We're just going to discuss numbers. All right. So I'm going to give you a foundation for comparison. The doses that we use in clinic for ketamine infusion is somewhere between 50 milligrams to maybe 150 milligrams. Okay, so 50 to 150 milligrams given over about an hour. That's a typical infusion for us. Blood levels that you might achieve, okay, just talking numbers, would be somewhere in about 200, okay? Not milligrams or anything, just a number. Be about 200. Now, that is at basically peak level. So if I was to push all the medicine in you and then check a blood level, that's about what your blood level would be, is 200. The autopsy report listed Perry's blood level at 3,500. So 3,500 compared to 200, and I wanted to put that in comparison and equate that to, well, what kind of ketamine dose would he need to have received to get that blood level? So our clinic dose, 50 to 150. His calculated dose, now keep in mind this lab is done, post-mortem, so we don't know when he took the dose. So there was time from when he took the dose to metabolism to breakdown of the drug, and so I can't really say what his peak level was, but during the autopsy his level was 3,500. On a milligram basis, based on the calculations I came up with, that is the equivalent, estimating his body size, of about 1,000 milligrams of ketamine.
Oh my gosh.
1,000 milligrams of ketamine.
That's unbelievable.
That is...
And the fact of that it had to be higher at peak, I mean, that was, again, you said post-mortem. He'd been dead for a while.
That is correct.
So I can only imagine how much he gave him, and it was... And then, of course, the question is for everybody that's not seen the news story, everybody's asking, how did he get it? Where did it come from? And I've got the news story pulled up. I'm looking at it right now, and there were 5 people that were indicted and charged today in relation to his death.
Right.
And I'm not going to try to pronounce any of their names because I couldn't if I wanted to. The only one that I can pronounce is Eric Fleming. Sorry,
Yeah.
Eric, if you ever see this, but I can't pronounce anybody else's names.
I saw
on
the
here.
one name, and I thought it was placenta.
Yeah, it was.
And so I was
but,
like, no, that's not her name, but it was placenta.
But oh yeah, but one of them, the first thing, and this should tell you right now how rampant abuse can be of any drug or anything else. I mean, we talked about it. You drink enough water, you can die from water toxicity. Right. It's just a fact of life. But one of the people, her nickname, and they've got it right here in the article, was the Ketamine Queen.
Yep.
That should tell you everything you need to know about what this woman's doing. There was a doctor involved, and then several other people, including Matthew Perry's assistant. But what I found very interesting is that it says that the defendants distributed the first time approximately 20 vials for approximately $50,000 in cash.
Yes.
And then second time, I guess they got a deal on it or something, but another 50 vials they sold to him for $11,000 in cash. But I'm sorry, ketamine doesn't cost as much as they charged. I think we figured earlier that was about $2,700 a vial.
Yeah, it was about $2,700 a vial.
And
now to give you a comparison, a typical vial of ketamine has about 500 milligrams. So 500 milligrams per vial is kind of what the typical ketamine bottle is. So a 500 milligram vial for us in clinic would be probably about 7 doses of what we would give in clinic. So we get about 7 doses out of that bottle. Now in anesthesia, they're giving much higher doses. They may put you on a drip of ketamine during your procedure at 50 milligrams a minute. We give 50 milligrams over an hour. They're putting it in a minute, every minute in you to keep you down.
So Keith asked a question. He said, was the fact that he was in the hot tub having any effect on the drug or his body system?
Oh, absolutely. I've seen lots of reports for patients who, quote, overdose on certain medications, but they're in a hot tub. And what that does is it increases your body temperature. It causes blood vessel dilation in the body. Blood gets to move around a lot more and without as much restriction in there, so you get a higher permeability of the drug to different organ systems. Kind of similar to folks that drink a lot and decide to jump in the hot tub. They feel a pretty sick effect from that.
Definitely. Hey, Alex, sorry to see you go. Glad you joined us for the time you could, buddy. But I can't. So that's 70 total vials they sold him. And at 500 milligrams a vial, oh my gosh. I mean, he had more than enough there to kill him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, it just dumbfounds me, I guess. And what's bad is that his assistant, looking at the article and stuff, the assistant admitted to repeatedly injecting Perry with ketamine without medical training, including performing multiple injections on the day he died.
Yep.
And, of course, we don't know how much he was injecting one time. Was he injecting the whole vial? Was he injecting partial? Who knows?
Well, based on his calculated blood levels, 1,000 milligrams of ketamine would be 2 vials.
Would be 2 vials, but again, there we go. That was not peak. So
Correct.
we know it was more than that at some point. Had to be. So that's the thing is with any drug, but ketamine especially, it's if you're going to abuse it, you're going to have bad things happen. You know, there's an old saying, everything in moderation. I don't care what it is, whether it's alcohol, whether it's vitamins. If you take too many of any vitamin, you can do that. Take too much potassium, see what happens. Take too much of anything and see what
Advil,
happens to you.
Tylenol.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
those
I mean-
are good in therapeutic doses, but you exceed it, it's
Right.
going to lead to problems.
And that's why in the proper clinic setting, and that's something we'll mention too, clinic, you know, when we find out, okay, where did these people get all that ketamine? Well, the Dr. Chavez that was involved in that took it from his ketamine clinic. So he took stuff that was supposed to be for his patients, used in clinic, and sold it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just as unscrupulous of a doctor as you can have. And thank goodness you guys aren't that way.
No.
It's so it's you know, I don't know what more we can say about that whole situation except for the fact that there was a lot of bad actors involved, people that were greedy, and you have Matthew who admittedly talked about the depression and everything that he had on him, and just all that was going on. He was a troubled person looking for help, but unfortunately he was in the wrong place looking for the help. And Elijah, I like Elijah's comment. I freaking love ketamine. Treats depression amazing. And yes, it does. I can attest to that too. And Keith just said, now they're comparing it to the Michael Jackson death and how he went. Two totally different drugs, two totally different things. But there again, you had a doctor who was prescribing an anesthesia,
Yes.
propofol, that Michael Jackson never should have had in the first place at his house.
Yeah, propofol is a much, much, much more dangerous drug. I've given it in the ICU, intubating patients, vent sedation. Prescribed lots and lots and lots of propofol in the hospital. But it is very harmful. Basically, propofol is one of those medicines that you have to have emergency airway equipment available because it will stop your breathing.
Well, and that's the thing about ketamine, even in high doses, and we know how much Matthew Perry had.
Estimated.
Estimated, but he was still breathing because it takes a very, very, very high dose to affect your respiratory system on ketamine.
I don't think, again, going back, it has no respiratory effect. I mean, according to the research papers, it does not affect respirations.
Right. The only account that I found at all, and again, you have to ask, what else was going on with it? There was a lady, and this actually came off the FDA's website, and of course, these are the same people that said that thing begins with the letter V was safe for us all. So wherever you stand on that, you know, it is what it is. But the FDA is known for not always making sure the drugs are 100% safe before they give approval for them.
Well, they leave it to the drug company trying to market the medication to run the studies. Now, the FDA monitors these studies and reviews the results, but they only review the data that's presented to them. So yes, unfortunately, some medications are either overhyped or underhyped for a safety factor, which is why after a new drug is released, it's very carefully monitored by the FDA. There's adverse reaction reports that providers can submit if they see a patient and they say, hey, I'm noticing this trend with this medicine. They can submit those reports, kind of aftermarket reports for review. And that's happened to several medications that have been marketed out, and then we find out that in mass, there's an increased incidence of badness, and those drugs are pulled off the market.
Well, it's in, where I was going with that too is the fact that I found one account of a respiratory problem from ketamine. It was on the FDA's website, but this woman that's supposedly affected, she had some that she took at home, and they said it was doses that were what was in her system. According to them, they didn't give an exact number, but they said it was higher than the typical anesthesia dose.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're talking about way up there, and they didn't talk about what underlying conditions she had, what other drugs she had in her system. So I find it, because I'm like you, all the research I've seen is that ketamine does not affect respiration. So, I have to go, what else did this woman have in her system that probably did that? Just like Matthew Perry, it wasn't just ketamine in the system. He also had, can't remember the other drugs he had, but they were sedatives that was in his system.
Yeah, I didn't piece through that information. I was
Right. But
focusing more on the ketamine aspect.
But you take the ketamine and then you add the sedatives on top of it and get in a hot tub. That's a recipe for disaster. I mean, it is. And and then the Article 2 said that they found a lot of loose pills and other prescription medications there, but they didn't say what they were. So who knows what all was really in his system. And unfortunately, it was somebody that was crying for help and never got the help that he needed.
Right.
Unfortunately, and fell prey to some very unscrupulous people, in my opinion. So there you go. That's Matthew Perry in a nutshell and what happened to him. And I hate it. He was a funny guy. Loved him on Friends. I think we all did. And I grieve for his family and his friends, because I know there was a lot of people that loved him and missed him. But my thing there is, I encourage anybody, if you're having problems with depression, PTSD, anxiety, suicidal thoughts or anything, get help from a legitimate place. Get help from legitimate providers. Everybody needs somebody to talk to. I have a therapist that I go to. Me and Deb, I'm able to talk to her and be totally open with her. She's still with me, so really, I promise it's not going to hurt if you have somebody to talk to. But it's, the whole ketamine thing and talking about, and one thing I wanted Deb to chime in is the fact that we both had ketamine infusion, because we both suffered from depression and anxiety and PTSD from even childhood trauma. That's something that PTSD can come from, that people don't really realize sometimes how bad that is. But Deb, what's been your experience since you've had the ketamine infusions?
It's been life-changing. I've struggled with depression for most of my adult life. And in 2020, when my dad passed away, it just kind of, it exploded. And 15 months later, my brother passed away, and just, I was to the point of not functioning almost. All I wanted to do was sleep. And finding the ketamine infusion therapy, it's changed my life.
Well, and I know, so I'll ask you, I can talk about what it's done for me all day, but what have you seen in me? What changes have you seen in me since I've had the infusions?
Happier. You just seem lighter. Your spirit is lighter, and you've been able to talk about things that are bothering you, and just work through them. You've got more energy, there's more laughter. It's made a huge difference.
Sorry, it makes me a little emotional thinking about the changes that's happened. And I think me and you both said, and with Mike here, I think I've told him and Melissa both, but I'll say it, we feel like we owe our lives to you guys, because we didn't have a life before we started ketamine, and also before we came to you as our primary care providers. I mean, God, my blood work when we first ran it. He laughs because, he remembers what it looked like too. My blood sugar was off the charts. My testosterone was almost non-existent. And of course, that affected every other lab that I had. And now we have corrected those problems. And I feel so much better, it's unreal. And working on other aspects of my health, I now have, like Deb said, have more energy. I've finally actually started to exercise again. Whereas I didn't have energy to exercise. I didn't have energy to do anything. Now, the one thing I'll say too, with all the other changes that Deb talked about, I can't tell you now. The one thing I can tell you is my depression's virtually non-existent. That's one thing I can say that ketamine has made a huge dent in. And when I do get depressed, it lasts for a very short period of time, and I'm talking about maybe 30 minutes to an hour or something.
And it's more just the highs and lows of
just
life.
the normal. Yeah, it's not the depression where before I did ketamine infusion therapy, I would literally sometimes get off work in the afternoon and try to figure out what angle I need to hit a guardrail on the way home so I could get out of this life. That's how bad it was. And all that's changed. I don't have those thoughts anymore. Now, my anger, we're still working on some. It's not 100%. It's better. Everybody that I work with even says it's better. It's not perfect. But the one thing that I've noticed, and this happened, I had my last infusion I had Monday. And it was it that night that I started talking about things that I had buried that I didn't even realize. And this Monday night or Tuesday, when I started telling you about it. Mm-hmm. Hey, Alex, glad you're back, buddy. But that's the thing about ketamine. There's things that we all suppress in our system, in our mind, in our subconscious that we forget is there because it's a protection mechanism that our brain goes into to protect us from that trauma and reliving it. But the one thing that I realized, I've been just thinking, why is my anger still, why is it still the way it is? And sometimes I still just get so angry. And what I realized in talking to Deb about it was that there are some things that happened to me that I just buried. I never dealt with it. I was put through some real trauma by some people that I thought I trusted. And unfortunately, I never should have trusted them in the first place. And they put me through pure hell for about 3 years. And I've been angry, but I've never grieved about that trauma I was put through. I've never really dealt with those feelings. How was it you put it the other day?
That you have never just raged about it, that you have never just sobbed about it. You've only just touched the surface of it.
But that's because I had buried it. And that's something that I will, now that the ketamine has brought that to my attention, and that's what it does. A lot of times it doesn't, and that's one thing I'll tell anybody here. Ketamine is not, I think it's the closest thing to a miracle you can get, but it's not a miracle. You're not going to get a ketamine infusion and just fix everything. And that's something I think people need to know. That's why it's called ketamine-assisted therapy, psychotherapy, and that's where you have to have someone, preferably a therapist that is trained in psychedelic-assisted therapy, because a lot of providers out there don't know anything about it, and they don't know how to deal with that. And so finding somebody that can is very important, and somebody that can help you then work through these things as they come up. And I found a real good one that has helped me. I think we're very thrilled with her. She's very real and not so clinical as a lot of them can be.
Also important, even if they're not trained in it, they want to learn. They're willing to learn. That's important.
Well, as a matter of fact, our therapist got so interested after us telling her about ketamine, she actually came and visited you guys.
Yep.
And I think that was very, very important for her. And sorry, I love emotions.
Yep.
So they're just there. It's just all that stuff coming up. But
well, since you're emotional,
yeah, go ahead.
It's very important that you pair therapy with the ketamine infusions. Otherwise, you would just be continually getting infusions and not really getting much anywhere with actually dealing with and fixing any of the problems.
Yeah.
Well-
Melissa can speak to that if she wants to say something now.
Yeah, we haven't let you talk, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I was listening. I'm waiting my turn patiently. But,
You can
no,
butt in. That's what we do. So.
well, you know what I was gonna say, but Randy beat me to it, was about it not being this magic bullet, because I do think that's really important, because people that go in thinking that, you know, this is going to absolve them of doing the work, or you're going to be sorely displeased, because the what it does is it provides the opportunity to do the work for the things that we have not been equipped to access before now. So it opens the just like you said last night, which is a perfect example. Like things come up, and I generally tell my patients, you know, be very curious about memories that pop up or things that come out of the blue. Like, be aware of these things, because there's a reason that these things have come up, and it's for you to have the opportunity to address them. And that's the processing. So once you see it and you address it and you process it, then that's what absolves it. But that's the work, right? That's the work part of it.
That's the hard part.
That is the hard part. But, you know, I think that some of these things are so repressed that without the aid of these medicines, we would never access them through 20 years of talk therapy. It's like, this is the vehicle to give us access. That's what ketamine and other psychedelics are. But they don't fix the things. They just allow us to access the things that need to be fixed. And if we put in the work, just like you said, Deb, then we shouldn't be, you know, relying on ketamine like indefinitely. Like, it's a tool, it's a medicine. We get people off of all of their oral medications with, you know, with time and working with their providers. And, you know, people can end up just needing, you know, 3 or 4 boosters a year. And no oral SSRIs or SNRIs, which all of the side effects we know come with those. So, yeah, that's absolutely a reality that can be available for patients that they don't realize there's another option out there. And so, yeah, I think that it gives people an opportunity that they would not have otherwise to process things they've been carrying around their whole lives. And that's why I hear the word light a lot of times. Like you said, Randy seems lighter, his spirit is lighter. And
Yes.
you know, it's because we're so heavy when we go into, you know, that's what brought us there. And as we're ridding ourselves, we were literally like, you know, getting rid of things we've been carrying and holding on to without realizing it. And you do feel lighter. And yeah.
Well, I don't think you could have said it better. I mean, you're exactly right. Hey, Keith brought up something good, and this will be something good for you guys to address. So Keith said that on TV, they're saying that you need to keep increasing the dosage because your body gets used to the lower dose.
It's correct. It's a medical term called tachyphylaxis, meaning the more of a medicine you take, your body adapts to it, the receptors increase, and so you do need more of the medication to make it more effective. That's typically with chronic dosing, which is why in most infusion treatments, we start off with maybe 6 or 8 infusions initially, done over the course of a few weeks. And then after that, we reduce the frequency to maybe every couple weeks to every couple months. But yeah, I mean, if someone was coming in, we did actually have a patient that we fired because she was trying to come in every week and said, "Oh, I need an infusion, it's wearing off." And we're like, "No, that's not appropriate, and we think you're, you know, heading down the wrong track." And we stopped seeing her. But yeah, for someone who's getting it at home from an illicit source and can take as much as they want in an unmonitored amount, yeah, I mean, I'm sure the first couple 100 milligrams he had felt great, and then that didn't work as well, and so he had to keep increasing the dose and increasing, and you know.
Well, I think that's I think that's it. Somebody that's using it, number one, unsupervised, and has never been been medically trained in how much to give or knows nothing about, ketamine assisted psychotherapy, they can get in real trouble over that. I think that now I have heard that, everybody's different. We're all unique. And I know that there's some people I have read that their experience was that they had an initial 6 infusions, which I think is given over a 3 week period. And some people have never had another one.
Yep.
That took care of the problem. But then there's some people that have to have a couple of boosters a year. And there are, unfortunately, some people that sometimes need one at least initially once a month because everybody's different. And I'm sure you have people who go through the whole range, and even the dose they take is, I think we talked about that the other day. I mean, that can vary too.
It does.
Mine, I know that my dose that I get is a lot lower than some people's, a lot higher than others. So it's just, again, based on what the medicine's doing for you.
Yeah, and during the infusions, we're right there monitoring you. I mean, we're sitting in the room right next to you. We're watching your blood pressure. We're watching your heart rate. We're watching your oxygen levels. We're watching you. How are you tolerating it? If it looks like you're panicking or having anxiety from it, we'll chat with you. We'll talk with you. We'll see what's going on. If it looks like you're way too deep, we might kind of bring you out of it, slow the medicine down, stop the medicine. 5 minutes later, you're kind of back in the waking realm. But it's a very safe environment that we offer.
I can attest to that, and I know
Yes.
you can too, Deb. It's very
Definitely.
safe. But that's something that, as a matter of fact, Monday, to be honest, for whatever reason, my blood pressure was up. Since I've been seeing you guys, it stayed pretty good under control. But Monday was just one of those days. And I think so. It was a number of factors, including the stuff that was wanting to bubble the surface that I wasn't letting come out.
Yep.
And stress can raise your blood pressure. For anybody that doesn't believe me, there's people have heart attacks every day at work because of their stress, because their blood pressure goes through the roof. It's untreated, and it happens. But I know that Monday you had to stop my infusion halfway through and give me some medicine to bring my blood pressure down.
Mm-hmm.
Then we restarted the infusion. Everything was fine. And that's the thing too for a lot of people too. Even though it's what the best way I can describe it, it is dissociative. A lot of people experience it as I think I've described it before as having 1 foot in this world and 1 foot in the other. But even though that's where I was at, I still knew when you did that and stuff. I still have my faculties. I still knew what was going on around me. Maybe not 100%, but I still knew that. Even though it was interesting, some of the when we talk about psychedelics, some of the things that people see, I think that I brought up that I was seeing a soccer ball. So that was where that came from, guys. I don't know. There was no soccer ball in the room. I think he even brought up Deadpool, but that's probably because we'd seen that movie. So it was kind of a weird one. That's normally not how they go, but different things can influence where the medication takes you. And Keith had a good question. Can any doctor do this, or are there special training or something like that?
Technically, yes. Any physician with a license can do ketamine. Most ketamine clinics will be run by either a CRNA, which is a certified nurse anesthetist, because they have more familiarity with ketamine in an operating room setting. But keep in mind the ketamine we're giving in clinic is more for psychiatric use, the mental health aspect, which their training doesn't go over much. So a lot of them who decide to do ketamine clinics will get additional training in psychiatry, or they'll get a psychology degree or some additional psychological mental health care certification. The other providers would be emergency room physicians, because they give ketamine so frequently, they're familiar with it as a medicine, but again, the dosing parameters are different. The environment is different in a ketamine clinic. But I'm family medicine by training. I spent my first roughly 10 years in a primary care clinic, and then I've spent the last 7 or 8 years in acute hospital care settings, working in ICUs and taking care of ventilator patients and managing emergencies. So I became kind of familiar with sedation. We call it conscious sedation, putting somebody out while they still maintain the ability to breathe on their own. So that's kind of where my comfort level came from. I also attended a training course through IPI, which is the Integrative Psychiatry Institute. I went through a ketamine course there and got certified through them. And there's different other training courses that providers can go through, but it's not a requirement. Just somebody with a medical license can prescribe and administer ketamine.
That
And sell it to the ketamine queen.
yeah, evidently, and that's a scary thought sometimes. And there's never a doctor out there that would abuse that privilege.
None at all.
No, Keith, he's so funny. But something I just thought about that we've not touched on that I'll put out there. So there's several companies online that will send you oral ketamine at home after you go through a little questionnaire and stuff with them and have a over-the-phone conference with them, and they supposedly will do a session with you while you take their oral ketamine at home, and they'll be on a phone with you on a FaceTime call or whatever. And in my opinion, and this is my opinion only, I'm not speaking for anybody else, I think that is one of the worst ideas I've ever heard. Because again, for ketamine to be effective, it does have to be at the right dosages.
It does.
And I don't know how somebody, and it's person dependent. Again, we're all unique. Not everybody needs the same dosage. So my question would be, how are they figuring out what dosage these people need? Or are they all putting such a low dosage in there that they're mass marketing it that way? And so who knows how much you're getting or what you're getting, because I've looked at all their websites, they don't tell
That's correct.
how much is in it. So that should tell you something right there. It kind of scares me.
Right. We just did an intake on a patient a few days ago who was a member of one of those at-home services. She said her ketamine dose was 100 milligrams, and it's called a troche. It's a dissolvable thing you can put in your mouth. Takes about 15, 20 minutes for it to dissolve. Her dose was 100 milligrams. Now, when you take ketamine orally, you are only absorbing or getting the effect of maybe a quarter of that dose, so 25%. So her biologic dose that she was getting was 25 milligrams, which is very, very underdosed to be a therapeutic benefit. But the reason for that is because they're not there monitoring you. They can't do any resuscitative efforts over the phone. They're marketing to people they've not personally evaluated except by a questionnaire online and by phone. I don't know what their training is. I don't know who's doing the medical intake or medical interview. And they only know what you tell them. And a lot of patients may skew the truth, evade certain things because they're like, I want that medicine. I'm going to answer the questions appropriately so I can get that medicine.
Well, in that too, they don't know. So, okay, let's say that they're 100 milligrams, and that may have just been that patient's experience. Who knows what it is for anybody else? But okay, let's say they're 100 milligrams. What keeps somebody that's getting them from taking? I think that they do. From some of the ones I've read, they do like 3 of those troches a week for like 4 weeks. That's the supply they send you.
Her instructions were daily.
Really?
One
okay.
daily.
Okay, so some are different. But what keeps somebody from taking the whole pack they send you at one time?
Two things. One is you sign a piece of paper to say that you will take it as prescribed. That's the one thing.
Okay.
And two is it's a piece of paper that you sign, and now you have the medicine at home, and you're going to take it how you feel like it.
Yeah, exactly. I started to say, is that kind of like our laws that says on books that and written on paper, it says, do not speed, obey the speed limit.
Yeah.
And we know how well that works if you drive anywhere anymore. It's like I always said, law enforcement, that piece of paper does nothing except give me a way to arrest you after you've already disregarded the piece of paper.
Yeah.
It doesn't, piece of paper doesn't stop anybody from doing anything. Yeah. Never has, never will.
Now, and we do prescribe home ketamine, the troches, the oral ketamine, to a select few of patients. We very personally screen each patient we decide to treat. We have turned people down who want them, and we're like, we do not believe you're a good candidate for that, either for underlying medical reasons, psychiatric reasons, abuse potential, or when we were infusing them with ketamine, they had such an intense experience that we don't want them to have a similar experience at home and be alone or not know how to handle that.
Well, it's, that's a great, and that's a great point. There's also one of the things too that we hadn't talked about. There are some people who are just not good candidates for ketamine, and one group especially is people who are schizophrenic.
Oh, yes.
And that's something we hadn't talked about. So it's not for everybody.
It is not. Earlier in the conversation, we said ketamine was a derivative of PCP, and PCP was being studied when it was created to induce schizophrenic-like states. So they were trying to study schizophrenics, but couldn't find enough of them. So this drug, PCP, was being used to study schizophrenia in non-schizophrenic patients. So, yeah.
Wow. That's
Interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. How many studies have there been where we have experimented on people to induce things they never had in the first place?
Yeah.
And that's kind of like I read a whole study on LSD, and the reason we don't use it especially is that the receptor sites that it binds to, the LSD molecule is shaped just a little differently and sticks to those receptor sites and lasts longer. And that's why people can have one time of LSD and weeks later, if not months,
Trip for days.
Yeah, because those molecules get stuck there. That's why LSD is actually
scary.
very illegal to do anything. I saw the funniest thing the other day. It was a meme that said LSD is great for weight loss because who wants to go to the refrigerator when there's a dragon guarding it? I thought that was so funny. Made total sense. I get it.
But there are certain medical conditions we look at, schizophrenia being one of them, because of the dissociative effects of ketamine. Schizophrenics are a little bit more prone to delusions, and so we could send them into kind of an acute crisis. So schizophrenia is definitely a no-go on that one. Another one is bipolar mania. Now the caveat to that is in a current manic crisis. So you can have bipolar and you can have a history of mania, but if you are in recurrent manic episodes or in one currently, then it's not a good medicine for you, because even though ketamine is a sedative anesthetic properties, it is activating in the brain. So it's very kind of brain stimulating.
That's now there's something else we talk about the brain especially, and something we hadn't talked about is the fact of that ketamine actually has been shown to rebuild the neural networks of your brain. As a matter of fact, I know there's studies going on right now that they're doing trials of people with dementia to see if it won't help them, because it actually rebuilds those neural nets that's in your brain.
Yep. It was some of the original studies when they were giving it to mice or rodents. They would do brain biopsies after receiving it, and they actually have micron pictures of here's a nerve before and here's the nerve after, and the strength of the nerve, the neurons had regrown So they call it neuroplasticity and neuroregeneration. Not to so much that if you took a big injury to the brain that you're going to regrow your brain. It doesn't work that
Right.
way. But on a micro network, it does help with neuron regrowth.
Well, and that's one of the things I've also noticed. The depression relief and stuff has been great, but one of the things that me and Deb both talked about is the focus that we have, and I kind of
And my memory.
yeah, I kind of have related that to the fact of that I'm not going to take my brain out and put it under a microscope, but I totally believe that's probably, from everything I've read on all the studies, it's probably regrowing those neural networks, because what people don't realize is that trauma, depression, those things actually damages those.
Yes, it does. It floods the body with neurotransmitters, kind of like similar to a forest fire. You can have a forest fire that damages the forest, but then you also have folks that come out and do controlled burns, a very gradual burn to kind of get rid of the little waste in there. So it's a bit different. Big trauma, big stress super stimulates the brain, and that constant stimulation causes damage. But likewise, you can stimulate it a little bit to help it regrow.
Hey, Melissa, we've not heard from you in a while. You can really jump in. I'm sure you have something you want to add. Oh,
I was just, I was listening.
I know you were.
Yeah. No, I did. And I've been really impressed, because I thought I was going to have to chime in and correct all you guys several times.
You're married to me, not them.
Y'all getting it. Y'all are getting it, man. I'm really enjoying it. And I don't know, I guess the other thing I was going to say earlier was that, I hate to sometimes I feel like I'm not overselling, but you just want to be optimistic, because it doesn't work the same for every single person, right? So not everyone is going to have immediate relief of depression after one infusion.
Right.
But we do see, about 80% of our patients have at least a 50% reduction in their depression screenings from before to after this series of 6 to 8 infusions. But it's really hard not to sell it as a miracle drug, because of the things that we see and we experience just time and again. You just see, hope where people didn't have it before. And you see that, it's hard not to speak that truth. So there are some people that don't respond as quickly, but I don't know that we've had anyone that hasn't had any response whatsoever. And given there are many other variables at play and many other medications, and so we have a very personalized model with our patients, where we don't have a cookie cutter. This is how many you get, and this is the dose you get. It is, and this is the goal we're achieving. Like, that's not at all how it is. It's is this someone that would like to eventually get off their oral medications? Is this someone that's working with a therapist? Is this someone that's accessible to come in frequently for infusions? If not, we have, as Mike had mentioned, selected patients that will bridge with the oral medication as an extender between boosters, because maybe they don't have financial means or accessibility to come in. So it's all geared towards the human being that's in front of us, and we're all different, many variables at play. And I think that's kind of one of the differences about our clinic to other clinics around, is that we take a whole body approach, and we're not just looking at sticking an IV in their arm and seeing them out the door. It's like, what can we tweak, or what can we suggest to get you to the best state of wellness that you can get to. And it's hard not to speak to what we've seen. I mean, I'm kind of torn with that, because I'm like, I don't want to, oversell this, but I can tell you what I've seen. And what I've seen is it has changed lives rapidly. Before this, ketamine, all we had was medicines that maybe work in 3 to 4 weeks if you're lucky. But they all came with side effects that created other problems for humans in relationships, like
Yeah.
weight gain and sexual dysfunction, which are two big parts of life that it's a trade-off. And it's like that was the best we had. And that was, you had to wait out, someone in crisis or in the depths of despair, here's a pill, it might start working in a month. Yeah, it was like, what? Like,
Right.
so now we have something better, and it's like, how do you not scream this from the rooftops? It's just like, and it's so safe. The doses we give, I say this all the time, like it shouldn't work like it does at the doses we give. It's just, we don't even know, what yet to, scratch the surface of the biological or neurobiological ways that it's working. But we see the effects, and that's what we can be sure of, is that it is, by and large, very beneficial and very low risk. So why wouldn't someone try it? I mean, that's what it comes down to, yeah.
So Jill, if you're watching, you really need to have your first infusion. Anyway, that's an inside joke, but something you brought up, Melissa, that I hadn't thought about too. When we talk about other clinics in the area, and we're not going to talk about specific names, but I can say this, and there's a one person I will mention. They're not anywhere near us. They're out in San Francisco, Dr. Anthony Cave. Some of you guys may have watched some of his videos. He's a board certified anesthesiologist. He runs ketamine clinics out there, has some great videos too, if you want to learn just more about ketamine. But one of the things that he talks about is how important it is to monitor the patients while they're getting the ketamine. And unfortunately, there's some clinics out there that, in my opinion, again, I believe that they're all about getting the money, hooking somebody up to an IV and getting them out the door. And they really, the way it appears, is they don't really care about the patient or the whole person, because they will actually hook them up and leave the room and leave them in there by themselves. And I can tell you from my experiences on ketamine, in my opinion, again, that's a dumb thing to do. Then the other thing I would say, you were talking about the different experiences people have. Everybody that's on here with me can tell you that I'm kind of the oddball when it comes to ketamine. As a matter of fact, I think, Melissa, you're the one that told me that my first experience was what most people get about their fourth or fifth.
That is correct.
I had, and I wish everybody could have the same experience I had on my first one. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. And it just goes to show you how different we all are. Because my first one was just the instant relief I got. And just, and I remember that Deb was there with me. We even took our daughter Brittany. She was in the room with me. And I remember that when the ketamine took effect and started happening, I remember that I'm there in the chair laying there, and I just remember these tears rolling down my face. I just remember it just started, and it was nothing. And I remember you were looking at me, and I said it's tears of joy, so much peace, so much. I feel so much love. I feel so much. There was no sadness. It was just it was after years of just feeling so depressed and so horrible about myself and everything that it was, I just never felt what I felt. And I wish everybody could get that on their first one, but unfortunately, again, we're all different. But a couple of questions here, real quick. One thing that Keith brought up, he said that his fear is down the road, if this is abused, it's going to be overregulated. I think that's a fear, but that's a fear with any drug medication out there.
It is.
I mean, it's just, and unfortunately, there are actually plenty of regulations in place. It goes back to what we talked about a minute ago about having a law on paper. No matter how many regulations you write or how many things you put in place, there are people who are going to find a way to abuse it. It just is what it is. And I wouldn't ever recommend anybody, I mean, ketamine, several years ago had more regulations put on it because people were using it as a party drug, a street drug, had a lot of names, Special K, K-Hole, and all this stuff. But the problem with that is when you're buying it off the street, you never know what else is in it. Fentanyl is getting added to everything, and what a dangerous combination that could be. So if you're out there using this recreational as a party drug, stop it. I implore you to stop it because, a lot of lives have been lost that way because, again, it's not so much the ketamine itself, it's what's in it or what it can be cut with. So Keith asked, and here's a good question for you guys. Could you also not get it from multiple outlets, like being on several Weight Watchers programs? Or I think that's a good one years ago when the opioid epidemic was going on, people would go to different clinics to get it, so they had to put safeguards in place. So he's asking, could you not do that with ketamine?
In fact, you can. I mean, there's nothing to stop you from making the ketamine tour across town, stopping off at each clinic and getting an infusion. Unfortunately, there's not a national medical record system that we can all reference in. It's not anything reported to the pharmacy or the controlled substance database because we administer it in clinic and we don't report that. The home treatments, could you sign up with 3 or 4 different companies and get them? Probably. I don't know what checks and balances they have with their system. Those should be reported to the controlled substance database that we can reference to see, but sometimes there's a lag. There can be a lag of a day to maybe a month before something's reported. But yeah, that is an absolute risk.
Good question. So last question I got on here. Does Dr. Major have a backstory why he chose this to do as a life's work?
Life's work.
Why'd you choose to be a doctor?
Why did I choose to be a doctor? Because law enforcement wasn't working out for me. That was going to be my initial career choice, was law enforcement. And then I was going to do pilot training and be a pilot in the military, and that didn't work out. So I elected to go to college, and I needed to go to college, so I chose a degree that I knew I could pretty easily get and be guaranteed a job in the military, and that was nursing. And then while I was a nurse for about 8 years, seeing all these medical residents working with, going, oh my gosh, if they can do that, so can I. Just quite challenging. And then went to med school. So that was it. Primary care was going to be my focus. It still is. But again, it started, kind of this ketamine was when I was in the military and actually assigned in Washington, D.C. Just after 9/11. So I was working in the Pentagon shortly after 9/11. And I was put in charge of readiness and personnel, preparing for the next big attack. So that was a lot of stress and anxiety there. And then also doing rotations at Walter Reed and surgeries on orthopedic injuries and battle damage and the soldiers there, just kind of seeing the worst, the worst of the folks there. So depression got hold of me pretty bad. And so we sought out ketamine treatment and did it, and it was phenomenal. So like I said earlier, we said when we get our own clinic, this is what we want to offer.
It's funny because I know that your lovely wife has mentioned several times how we're a lot alike, me and you, and listening to the whole thing about.
I've had my same cell phone though for probably about 6 years now. So.
Well, but when you were talking about law enforcement wasn't working out for you, what's really funny, and I don't even know if I've even told you this. So when I was younger, I thought about going to medical school and becoming a doctor, but I decided I didn't want to do all the college, so that's why I went into law enforcement. So it's just the opposite stories. Yep. And I found that very funny when you said that. I thought, oh, how weird is that? Hey, Melissa, question for you. What made you choose this line of work?
Probably job security initially, because I knew that in medicine that there was always going to be a need. But what that's why I chose it. Now, what kept me in it is a different answer, and that because it definitely isn't what I expected it to be. Because no one does this for the money, I'll tell you that. It's because you are actually on the ground, and it's probably very similar to a first responder, even though it's never necessarily in the ambulance or on call in the ER, but you're on the ground with human beings face to face that are going through the same struggles that you have been fortunate enough to have found a way through. And so whenever you come to that realization, then I always envision it like I just kind of turned around and extended my hand, and that's kind of how I feel like every day when I show up to work. It's like, okay, I've been there, I've got this, So it just became, I'm sure at some level, I always felt like it was a calling, but I didn't see that for a long, long time. And it's probably because I was still processing my stuff. But at some point I realized, okay, I've let my stuff go. Now I can turn around and show someone else how to do it too.
Man, that's awesome. That's a good story. So, wow, this is the longest podcast I've done. We went well over an hour, and no new questions right now. So the last thing I think we need to touch on, you guys got a special event coming up. And this is for any business owners in Knoxville or the surrounding area. And why don't you tell them a little bit about the event that's coming up, Mike?
Sure. So our clinic is unique. It's one part ketamine clinic and one part primary care, kind of about half and half. For our primary care focus, we're wanting to offer health benefits to small businesses. Small businesses, if they have under 50 employees, are not required to obtain health insurance for their employees, but many business owners would desire to offer a health benefit to their employees, for retention and just betterness. If they call in sick, they can say, hey, go call the doc and see if they can take care of you and get you back to work as soon as we can. And so on September 12th, we're hosting a small business meeting. It's going to be at a local venue. You can register on our website if you're a small business owner or just interested in hearing the talk. And we'll talk about how you can offer health care to your employees without the excessive cost and burden of health insurance.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting. I know that we're going to be there. And just to tell everybody, too, our business, Knox Rising Complete Auto Care, we actually take advantage of that. And I think that we have several of our employees now that are seeing you guys, and they love coming to you guys and say it's and every one of them, our employees, have, and I'll tell you this right now, every one of them said how much they love you guys and how much it's the best experience they've ever had with medical providers.
Yeah.
So, and I think that speaks a lot. And same thing with us. I mean, we feel the same way. Myself, Deb, and our daughter Brittany, we all go to Mike and Melissa now, and it's just and for businesses, it's an awesome partnership, because the one thing I can say is that because of Mike and Melissa's attention to detail and how much they care about people and the time that they can spend with them to really find out what's going on with them, it can definitely benefit by keeping your employees well, so they stay out of the ER and don't have to go to urgent care all the time. Matter of fact, you all have got a fantastic little app that's HIPAA compliant that somebody can text you right through the app and you'll get right back to them.
That's right.
On that. And I know I've used it several times myself. And so I encourage anybody, if you're a business owner, you're watching this, I encourage you to go to embodyhealthcare.com and check it out. Sign up. Come out to the event. I'd love to meet you. I know Mike and Melissa want to meet you and talk to you. And it'll be a good time. Find out more about what their practice is. No obligation. Just come hang out, have some great conversation, find out what they're about. But anyway, it has been a pleasure, guys. I appreciate you guys doing this. Any last thing anybody wants to add?
No, it's been awesome working with
Thank
with
you
y'all.
very much for having us on. Yeah.
No,
Awesome.
you're very welcome, Deb. you got anything you want to add?
No, not right now.
Even our daughters had ketamine infusion. We didn't talk about that, but it's been life changing. That's what I'll say. It's been very life changing for Brittany, and we're so thrilled. Again, I said this earlier, and it's how I feel. Not only from the ketamine point of view, but since you guys took over my primary care, things that I've been struggling with since the 90s, we've gotten under control. And it really saddens me that none of my previous doctors could seem to do that. And I don't know if it was a lack of want to or just they didn't have enough time for me. I don't know what it was. But I find that that's a very sad state for our healthcare system today. And so I encourage everybody, check out mbodyhealthcare.com. That's the letter M, bodyhealthcare.com. And anyway, guys, thank you very much. Next week's show, 6 o'clock, we're going to talk about peptides. There's a new one for you. I've gotten very interested. Mike's smiling because I took them a stack of books the other day.
I have homework to do this weekend.
But peptides, if anybody doesn't know what they are, they're neat little molecules. They're in our bodies already. They're made up of amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of protein, the building blocks of life. So next week, we're going to talk about peptides, 6 o'clock on Thursday. Guys, have a wonderful week, and we will talk